this is what a time to be alive. What a time to be in the business of creating value. And we, as we're recording this, like Q2 2026, just 3 months ago, we had new models introduced that completely changed how we did things 6 months prior. So just one of the reasons we met and I became involved with strategic coaches because I spent 8.5 years working with Peter Diamandis building Abundance 360, and the things that he shares about exponential change, which meant I was tracking AI since 2012. So I've been playing the long game on this one, and my hope is like, what would make this pace of change constantly increasing, which we're now feeling, what would make this great? And to me, after coaching over 500 entrepreneurs one-on-one since ChatGPT came out in November 2022, I've seen so many times how this technology can allow us to share our gifts with each other, to collaborate in a human first way, and then build a business model that allows the rest of our life to exist. And so now we've got these tools. And I think what we're getting right is we're figuring out how to do business differently. Lior and I often talk about what is the AI version of your org chart and starting to build those out. He's been doing amazing work on the engineering and development side of all-encompassing OS systems that allow agents to plug into your existing work, which frees up the humans for the things that only we can do, which is witness each other, build strong relationships. And our business is CTOX, where we help technology leaders become fractional CTOs. And a lot of that business model work, you'd think it'd be just about the business model, but it's also unlearning everything we've learned about what work is, how you create value as a human. And I think what's exciting is we're seeing all the ways we used to think about work that actually agents could do. And in terms of what I think we're getting right, is we're automating the work that by and large, we didn't want to do anyway. We didn't like doing. I don't get up and go, wow, I can't wait to update the spreadsheet or do all this like exhaustive, brain draining analysis. I just want to show up and have my morning briefing. Here's who you're talking to today. Everything's done. And so that's exciting. And being able to live that. As we record today, I am over 3 years into a 3.5-day work week, which only could have happened with AI. So when I say new business models, new ways of collaboration, it's so that you can also live the lifestyle that you want to live. And so what I think people are getting wrong right now, and look, everybody's on their own journey. I don't want to throw any shame, but it's really, really, really addicting to be highly capable and have access to today's emerging AI models. And so I'm seeing people take what is all the ideas that are stuck in their head and now they're prompting and it's 3 a.m. and they need to sleep and bringing the laptops to the bathroom and all these really extreme, and they sound extreme, but I've heard these humans do it, and it's because they want to keep the prompt going. There's always another idea, there's always something to do. So I think we have an opportunity now to start on a clean sheet of paper, first principles. What is business? What do we want it to be? What do we want work and life to feel like? And if you're an entrepreneur, you have a lot more control and agency over this than you think. And what would make it great? And then what needs to be true from the business and collaboration perspective, so that you are sharing your gifts, earning in a way that allows you to live that lifestyle that you want to live, but also taking the efficiencies that we can get from AI and reinvesting them into the things that make life worth living. Which for me, spending time with my family, traveling, I've got a lot of greenery here. So there's a lot of like hobbies related to tending to plants and flowers and, just staying connected to the natural world. I live in a city, so this is also one of the ways that I am regularly in relationship with nature. And, there's so many fun things to do that have nothing to do with a screen. And I think the big opportunity now is figuring out what the most energizing of those activities are for us, and then figure out how you automate and streamline and use AI to do all the other stuff that isn't so fun.
Yeah. Well, I love everything you said because I think that it's almost like the AI companies are marketing and be like, hey, there's gonna be a lot of disruption because it forces a little bit of fear of missing out, right? And you can imagine. But what I love about how you and Leo are taking and advising and coaching and cultivating is that AI is actually a ticket to freedom. But before we get there, I want to just give some context to the audience. I got to see this maybe 2 months ago. 2 months ago, and I want everyone to understand that when we talk about changes, and when Marissa's talking about changes, is that we're talking about exponential changes. And I think of Lior and Marissa. I mean, Marissa's been 14-year head start on most of us, and not only in the fact of just that, hey, I've been studying it, is that with her and Peter having a front row seat to literally whatever is the space between the tip of the spear and the next like synapse, is that's where you've been like living in. But I have to tell you that I had a conversation with Leor, and it was just kind of ad hoc conversation where he started talking about this idea of org charts. Can you talk a little bit about when we say an org chart? I think people in their brain when they're listening to this, or if you're watching this on YouTube, are going, "Oh, I know what an org chart is. You know, there's the CEO, COO." And it's the first time I've ever seen something that listed technology not as a tool, but as an actual partner with like partnership like qualities. Can you talk a little bit about that so people can really understand that AI no longer is like, oh, I'm just going to bring up ChatGPT and do something, that there's this shift actually created space for technology as kind of the closest thing I've seen is like, hey, if I was to go hire someone. But I want to, but I think that there's it's super important that it's not to replace people, but it's actually to make space alongside humans. So if you could talk a little bit about what is an org chart when you think about AI and what you and Lee are doing.
Yes. Well, I think the best way to tell it is to share how we're doing it at CTOX, because then you see kind of the old way, new way. So that's funny. When you said February, I was racking my brain because we just rolled out this system. And so now we've been in it for almost a quarter and starting to build on it. So right now, our human team is 20 strong, 15, 20 strong, and we're all over the place. And there's executives and team leads. And it used to be that each human might have some direct reports, a project manager, a virtual assistant, or similar, humans who are doing the things depending on their role. Now, a lot of that is agent work. So agents, uh, let me share. So a lot of my work is in content. 15,000 articles pre AI, 20 now with, and a couple ghostwritten books. Like, their content has been my land. And it used to be that a great content team, you had people who were specializing in headlines, or there was a copy editor, and these were actual distinct human beings. There was the person writing it, there was the editorial manager overseeing everything. And in March, I built an end-to-end content OS that ingested everything I've ever done, spoken, written, and extracted all of my voice patterns, the signature phrase, power phrases I say, how I structure stories, the language I like to use, how long my sentences are when I'm doing certain kinds of things. The and then so there's like my voice print, how I would always talk. Then there are all of the frameworks that I use and teach with. And all of us have our own version of frameworks or things and principles, values, things that are showing up in all of our work. It used to be that a content strategist would sit and mine transcripts and maybe even print them out and highlight. Like, this was not so long ago. That we would do work like this. But now I just point the agent at it and I go, okay, take the transcript from this podcast I just did with Ben, and what are some new stories that I haven't shared, or what are some new things you've learned about how I tell stories? And it's going to update those voice principles. And then now my content team, I've got a simulated editorial panel. And on that panel is the developmental editor, the line editor, the copy editor, the fictitious book agent. Now, none of this is to replace the actual human beings who do those jobs, but it is to make sure that when it gets to those humans, they have a higher quality product to work with. And their work gets faster, better, easier because they're able to add improvement ideas rather than like fix the basic stuff. So I think that's the through line is every business, and Lior says it at CTOX. He says to the team, if you could hire 30 people, each of you, what would they do? What would they do? And then people start thinking, okay, what are the things I do that I don't want to do anymore? Which is like a pretty good place to start with agent work. And then from there, they need instructions. They need a goal. It's an SOP. So just like if you were going to hire a human person, like these skills are transferable. The difference is that from middle of Q1 2026 onward, you can really build some highly capable agents who can prepare your research and organize your briefs so that when you sit down on your recording day, you know exactly what you're saying and when, and you can just relax knowing it's all taken care of. And we talk a lot about the business side, but the personal side to me is even more interesting. I just built an agent this morning because I had a big planting day yesterday, and I was putting some new flowers in new pots. And I kind of forget sometimes which one needs to be watered when. And some of them have unique light requirements. And, if they're turning yellow and I've made an intervention, I might forget about what I've done or when I last fertilized it and watered it. But this is all things that you can start to program. So I just started talking to my favorite daily driver, Claude Code. Here's what I want to do. I want to upload pictures and have you tell me what's wrong and what I need to do. And I want you to track when I did that thing so that I can make sure I'm not making too many changes at once. And that's run and that's going. And now I have a twice a week briefing to like go and check that thing. Like kid activities, reminding me of the kid activities and what's coming up and when I have coverage from the babysitter and when we need to adjust the calendar. Like there are thousands of things that we're carrying in our heads that we don't have to carry anymore. And so when I think about agents, Lior talks about, the Iron Man suit that's on top, and it's like all the coordinated actions that those agents need to take, all just happening with the rules that you determine, and they don't get sick or call out or have terrible things happen in their family life. So at CTOX, we as we're recording this, we have 99 agents working across 4 different departments, and some of them one specializes in a transcript miner. Like take a look at all the transcripts from the group calls and identify great clips or moments that are useful for content, that are useful for conversion collateral in the sales process, marketing, all these other uses, including our voice prints and our story Bibles, so that we're communicating in a way that sounds like us. Everybody's read the AI generated work that sounds like a robot. Like none of that is in our world, because I'm so well. And then that's my special interest. Is like every month I publish an update with all the AI tells I see, and I'm like, never do any of these, and now it's like 20 some distinct violations, and it has to pass through that. But I update it every month because, there's always something exciting to scroll through an algorithm and see, and like, oh, nope, we're never having that in our content.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And what I love that you just gave as a context, and I think this is the thing that you do super well, that you and Lior do really, really well, is take these complex things that feel overwhelming. I think when people think about AI, it just feels like this massive thing to try to get your hand around. And it was just a simple question. regardless whether you own a business or not. If you are a person that works in a business for someone else, or you don't own a business at all and you're just a stay-at-home parent, right? Which, by the way, I hate this stay-at-home, because at the end of the day, it's running another business. It's called Home Incorporated, right? But if you were to just ask the simple question, if you were to hire 30 people, what would you have them do? What a great structure for people then to start to go, oh, okay. Um, like, how can I bring AI into this? And I listen to and I hear you say, and I'm sure people who are listening to this go, oh, for 3 years, you've been having a 3.5 day week for work. And you've pumped out in 3 years now 5,000 pieces of content. And it's interesting. You turn the news on, and there's all these protests for, like, no to data centers, and there's a whole bunch of different reasons. By the way, this is apolitical, right? But there's this fear, but there's this other opportunity on the other side of it, because it seems like they're scared of the thing that potentially is freedom. Do you think, is it because, are we addicted? It's not even about loss of job, but there's a loss of identity. Are we addicted to the grind? Are we addicted to, like, these, like, axioms of, like, no pain, no gain? Like, I mean, can you dive into it? Because I hear you saying that. I'm going, this sounds amazing. What a great construct.
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to talk about, like, even in my own family. Like, my grandparents on my mom's side were agriculture workers, sugarcane plantation workers. And the biggest value was get an education, because that's what they weren't able to do. So then my mom was the first one to go straight uh to college, and then, and then her thing was she got a great government job, and and so everything was about stability. And it's interesting because I didn't have a traditional path to entrepreneurship. I didn't have any of these examples, but work ethic was a huge one. It was such a huge value, and it was almost like outwork them. And that my dad used to tell me, I'm paraphrasing this quote, but it's like, the harder I work, the luckier I get, and it's like I have all of these diamonds are forged under pressure. And there are all these different axioms and quotes that would keep me going. That it's funny because my S Corp is called ridiculously efficient. And when I started it in 2011, it really was about doing more in less time. But in my consciousness at that time, I was still operating from that old model of, okay, well, I graduated in 2006, 2007 and 8 came right after. So the way that I got through that economic downturn was by freelancing with multiple clients. It's funny because it's like early fractional. Now we're having a callback moment. Um, but then I was like, okay, I can string together multiple part-time things, but I was still writing every day. And so in terms of, like, the fears, we don't know what we don't know. Of course, we associate so much of our self-worth and our identity with what we do for work. It's the go-to thing when you're at a cocktail party or a oh, so what do you do? And because it's like, how do we classify you based on these old things? And the funny thing is, I never had a clear, crisp response to that question, because I'm like, oh man, do I talk about, I'm more than a writer. I'm not quite an entrepreneur yet at this time, but like, what am I? I don't know. I do lots of things. Like, there isn't a clean response. And I think that's what's going to happen, because I think about the roles, not jobs, but the roles I've had in the last 20 years. None of them existed 20 years prior. So we're going to create a lot of new jobs. And this is something that you hear at Singularity University a lot, because this is historically how it's gone. New technology is introduced, old jobs change, and then new ones get created. And we're in this in between time where the old frameworks of collaboration are dying. You see the market corrections. It's so funny how they have, like, these different euphemisms for like layoffs that affect thousands of people, but it's like market correction. We've had, I was just looking, over 90,000 workers in tech have been laid off so far in 2026 while as we record this. And so it's several hundred every day. And that's a factor of we no longer need to hire entry level engineers anymore because we have these powerful AI tools. So what do we do instead? Well, we're seeing a lot of one person creator based businesses starting to go, or like people are doing more traditional work, vocational school, trades that are not necessarily going away, but they got a side hustle, and everybody's got a side hustle. In March 2026, Lior said something at one of our all hands that just blew me away. He said, I want all of you to have a side hustle powered by AI. I'll help you. Ask me for help. And I just thought, whoa. And he goes, I hope that when you have your own sovereign income, you'll still want to come and build CTOX with us. And I thought, whoa, this is a big moment, because when everyone can monetize their skills, their passions, their interest, and by the way, you can just start prompting, like, what businesses could I run and do using what I already know and what I enjoy? And to have a business that's bringing in real income, like our top sales guy, he used to build websites a few years ago, and now he's our top closer. So he knows how to sell, he knows how to build websites, and he built this whole framework after this one kind of lunch and learn we did, where Lior's teaching everybody how to use Claude Code in the terminal. And he built a system that scraped all the local businesses that didn't have websites, sent them an outreach, put up a prototype website, said, hey, you don't have a website. Would you like one? Here's what it costs. Schedule a call. We'll talk about it. And he made $6,000 in like 3 days.
Oh my Lord.
And just like not even trying, and like in his part of Florida. So you think about that, and why would someone want to go through the craziness of entry level work when you could get an entrepreneurship education in real life and build those skills, have your own sovereign income, and then go, okay, how do I want to live my life? Do I want to be with these certain people, or I have this big mission that I want to pursue? Now, we're not there for everybody. We're not there for every job, for every role. So there's some real like cross training, upskilling moments. And I think about my world in content and organic marketing. We got some upskilling to do, but here's the thing: we've got the discernment, and that's the part that's needed for AI to work really, really well.
I just got done doing some college touring for my oldest. And what was interesting is we went to the University of Florida, and they made a really big point of saying this. They said, every single one of our degrees, they don't basically say we require, but they basically said we strongly advocate and offer a certificate with each degree in AI, so that every degree is cross-trained with AI. And I just thought that was one of the most brilliant things that I had heard. So I started asking that at other college visits. I'm like, hey, talk to me a little bit about AI. And you know what? Almost all of the other universities completely unprepared for it. And I just went, that was a selling point. If you have the discernment to realize that, hey, anything that you do, I think that you now need to have a certificate with that says, how do I do this faster, easier, or as you said, ridiculously efficient way, because that's going to be how to create value. And I want to talk a little bit about this because as I'm listening to you, I almost think that people think it's either too good to be true. It's like, but then I hear the story about like your lead salesperson literally doing something that is like breathing to him, and he just made $6,000, some sovereign income. How do you define value, and how do people think about themselves and how they create value? Because I think that in this value conversation, there's almost this like subconscious narrative of worthiness. And I'd love for you to like talk a little bit about how do you define value and how are you seeing that play out, especially because you're going to have a front row seat because you are doing live beta testing inside your own companies of doing this. And I'm curious about what are the steps if someone's listening to this? How do they navigate that conversation? Because there's that conversation of tactical, I do this and this, but then there's like this other conversation that no one seems to want to talk about. Am I actually worthy of actually having a side gig? Am I actually worthy of being able to make $10,000 extra a month on something that I just think is like mundane, right? And I think I don't know. Am I onto something?
Well, what's fun about it is we're figuring it out in real time. We're just a couple chapters ahead in the book in this one particular area. But, I think the strategic coach unique ability concept is going to be such a timeless principle. And it's even more important now. I remember when I did my unique ability uh, exercise where I'm going and asking, what do you see as my greatest gifts and skills? And I remember the responses I started getting back, and this is like over 10 years ago. And it's, you light up the room, you bring so much positivity. Da, da. It's all about like that energy part. And I wanted at that time, I'm like, yeah, but talk about like the things I do. How come it? Because it didn't feel special enough, right? It didn't feel like there was something in my psyche at that time that equated my worth with what I did, with what I produced. And that was the first thing I had to let go. And now coming back to it and owning it is, yeah, when I'm in the room, better decisions get made, businesses tend to grow, and whatever we're doing gets better. And the way that the things I do is going to be different every time. Sometimes I'm talking, sometimes I'm not talking, and I'm just there. Sometimes I'm the contrarian. Can you imagine? And I'm the one saying no when everyone else is saying yes. And value is in the eye of the buyer. And I think what AI and the internet have done is allowed us to reach more buyers and connect with them in a way that doesn't force us to contort and compromise who we are. We can be exactly as we are, unapologetically so, and find the right segment of humans for whom hearing you be just you, it's so much more than enough. It's a dream come true. And then to have a business model where they can work with you in a sustainable way or learn from you or collaborate with you, those things are all going to change. The old models aren't really working, but um, room to grow, I suppose.
Yeah. The imagery that came to my head as I'm listening to you talk about this value creation is that you don't have to go to school. Now, I'm not suggesting, by the way, that people don't go get further education, right? But I feel like AI has created this idea that you are already enough. And I always tell my entrepreneurs I coach is that the perfect version of you already exists. So stop like trying to be there because it already just exists. And we often want to go external to find the value, but the value is actually the internal conversation that is happening. It's like the source code. And we talk about Claude Code. Well, we've had a code machine AI running in us since like birth, and we've taken these external things. But I keep thinking about that people go to casinos. Why? Because they're like, if I win and I'm lucky enough, I will win something that will allow me some type of freedom. The reason why Powerball is so powerful because if I win, how would this change my life? And I just had this really distinct image in my head that the ultimate Powerball ticket has been sitting inside us all along. I mean, it, it just seems so obvious that it's almost like, well, seems too simple. I mean, even you talked about like having a side gig. I guarantee you people who are listening is going to be like, well, how do I do that? And then you just instantly said you eliminated that obstacle because you said, well, you just interview me, find out some things about me and what things could I do that would literally be like breathing to me that could potentially, and how would I monetize that? You eliminated, you don't need MBA. You don't need a business degree. You just need to have an internal conversation. I mean, how does that land for you, Marissa?
Well, I'm thinking of, Peter's words always ring in my mind. And one of Peter's laws is an expert is someone who can tell you exactly how it can't be done. And there's this element of curiosity, but also humility. Like I don't know, and I'm willing to just spend 20 minutes talking to a machine to see what's going to come out of it. But what an interesting, that's all it is now. It's not like 6 months ago or 12 months ago where you needed to have some knowledge of how to prompt properly. And now you just talk to it and it's reading between the lines. And Interview Me is one of the most powerful things that you could ask any of these tools to do, because you're providing the context and also the nuance. And I was just honestly 3 days ago, because I have this system that has ingested all of my professional and personal activities, journal entries, notes from meditations and things. I did that same value mining exercise. What are the things that I'm not even valuing right now because they represent previous versions of me that could be monetized assets? And in what context? What would need to be true for them to be successful? And which systems do I already have that someone would pay for?
Marissa, my brain is exploding right now because I just had this other realization that IP used to be about. And the fact is, I have this great idea that no one else has thought of, or the nuance in it, right? But what you just said in terms of is that you took all these past lived experiences, your experience and how you metabolize them, and how you either it was something hard, maybe it wasn't something hard, something natural. That is actually the new IP. It's waiting to be mined. I think about, you watch these shows like in Discovery Channel, right? They're going back up to Alaska. And again, Alaska, California, all these places that have been mined over and over and over again, right? But just different technologies. First, it was a pan, right? And then it was just, honestly, it was so obvious. It was like you just kept digging, oh, there's some gold, right? And then it panned, and then it just kept going in further and further. Yet there are still people who are making millions of dollars off of tailings of past miners, right? Because the technology has changed. And I just had this big realization that my life through this 43, almost 44 years is basically all of the tailings that I thought that I had already mined. And quite frankly, I probably only took 1% of the gold from it.
And anyone who is growth oriented is like, after you get what you wanted, and it's time to move on and you go, but there's still some utility there. There's still, to your anecdote, like there's still some gold. And if it used to be like, oh, ideas are easy, execution is hard. Now the execution is not so hard either. And it's the discernment, the curiosity, the next frontier. What are we doing next? Where all the opportunities get built. But then the real opportunity now with AI is like, okay, let's build some scaffolding. What are the ongoing systems that, even though I'm growing and evolving, I can still create value for other people where I'm 2 chapters ahead in the book.
Mm. What a great book. I mean, what a great book. That just, it doesn't end. And is it a trilogy? Is it like basically like Dune written over like 25, 500 page chapters? I mean, that is absolutely wild. This all leads me to this idea of what does it mean to human? Not even to be human, but what does it mean to human? Because it seems like for years we've been taught to be productive, to like basically be machine. And it's almost like this wilding or unwilding. I can't remember, it's like this unlearning to relearn how to actually human again. Because what I'm listening to you, I'm just going, man, the fear around this is also maybe some resistance in the fact of people being uncomfortable with being comfortable with themselves. And to have to realize that, hey, the existing thing, the productivity, the machining I was learning, the unlearning of humanness so I can be machining is actually no longer valuable. It's actually, I need to reverse course. So how do you see, and how is your own experience on, like, what have you learned in, like, to be rehumaned? I don't know if that's the right word, but
Well, it's as good of a word as any as we have for this. And it's funny because we don't have a heck of a lot of models, at least in my world and in my lineage, of people who were allowed to be fully expressed without some major constraint on resources, primarily money or time, and backbreaking kind of stuff. And so where do you figure out? And for me, it's my 6-year-old. He is infinitely inspiring in terms of what he's curious about. And the things that he's been curious about from probably 2 years old. Um, one of the things is crashes and crumpling, little boy with his cars and his trains. He wants to know how things crash and crumple. And he's always been fascinated about this. And he goes outside, and it's a new context. Every opportunity for something to break, crumple, fall apart. And at first I'm like, man, and he had a speech delay, so I couldn't ask him about it really. And I couldn't get like a meaningful response, but I just got one right before his 6th birthday. Um, and he's focused on the after. It's not the crash, it's what happens after the crash. Sometimes the car goes on fire, sometimes it breaks into pieces. And he's trying to puzzle out all those elements. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh, material science, yes. Because I was trying to like connect his passion and his interest to a some kind of a destination where I could support his learning. So, bringing it back to us, it's like, what are the things that you were always curious about? And then how can you prompt yourself a new learning journey that is based on how you like to learn, the reinforcements you like to receive, the sorts of things that you're interested in doing. So, like right now, I'm all about plant propagation. That is the thing that I am learning. And what's fun about it is using the same tools and the same process of talking to the system. I've got a learning journey for my son to explain and explore material science in age appropriate language with the things that he's already got, and local events, because I think about space travel and all the frontiers that we're going to go into over the next 20 years, and like how he can skate to that puck, so to speak. And I'm also learning a lot about plants and how to grow plants. And I think there's something in here. It is a privilege to be in a place where you can be curious. But man, was that privilege created through a lot of generational hard work. And I feel like our parents and our ancestors took us as far as they could take us so that we can take it and run with it. And so I really do feel like there's this responsibility and opportunity that we have now to not do it the same way, to figure out together what it looks like. And that's the part about humanity that I think we're getting back to, because in the earliest days of civilizations and tribal communities, we did it together, and everybody needed to play a role. And I don't see everybody wanting to play a role, but that's the opportunity.
I want to continue this conversation about family and parenting, like in this like world of like AI. But why? But I want to expand upon that last thing you just said there. Why do you believe that people don't want to play a role?
Well, when you're busy and overwhelmed and overstimulated and overscheduled, learning something new feels like a lot of work, and it feels like a lot of something. And, we see it a lot with the CTOs, and they're like, oh, I'm busy. Like, life will never not be busy, right? But it's so easy. And the thing I often share with folks who are new to AI is I show them all the ways that algorithms are already affecting their decisions. It's in every news feed. It's in every time you open up an app, and it's Amazon, and it's showing you things. Are if you have stocks in the stock market, algorithmic trading, and there's just so many decisions that are already made with an algorithm. And it's the ones that we're not as aware of, like social media and curated news feeds. And the rabbit hole goes really deep. And as soon as I start having that conversation with folks, it's like, wouldn't you want a seat at the table in terms of how they're talking about these things? And if they're a parent, now we talk about the impact on their kids, and what kind of um, leader they want their child to become. And just thinking about how fast things have gone in the last 6 months or 2 years or 6 years, it's going to go even faster. It's not slowing down or stopping. And so, with that fact, what do you want to be true in the next 10 to 12 years? So that when your kid is of age and going out in the world, making decisions as an adult, they've got the raw materials to make it work. And then now they get interested. Well, okay, I'd start talking about this, and I'd start doing this, and I want to do these things together. Great. Let's fire up a session and figure out how to do that now. But if you say to people like, "Oh, go learn AI," it's like, "Oh, go learn about wine." There's so much to learn, and the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn. There's no there's no catching up. And Lior has this great phrase. He's like, you can't catch up with AI. It's like a fire hose coming at you, but the objective is to get wet. So you can stand at the side while the fire hose is going and just get wet, not like stand in the middle of the fire hose.
That's such good imagery. It, it's so good. You know, the what I find really interesting, and you had mentioned this earlier, and I'm having this sort of kind of comeback to this really important thing, is that we are such verbal creatures. I think we'd love to think that we can read, we can write, but truly we are verbal creatures. And one things you said earlier, and I don't know if anyone else caught this, but you said that you have these agents, and one of them is go back through all the group calls, right? To like remind, be like, hey, was there something else that we could learn from it? And I just was realizing that majority of where I've had the most gold or is when I'm actually recording. And even to the point where there's no one else in the room and I'm actually having a conversation with the machine, so to speak, but I just record my conversation with it. I'll read out loud in terms of what the actual machine is saying, but then I just start talking. And you can do it into directly into Chat GPT. But I find that in terms of what ends up happening is that conversation, that transcript potentially gets lost. You can't hold on to it and harvest it. And so I like to record it. And it almost seems to be, if you're going to have a conversation about what is AI, or even like to this point with your kids, is to have a simple, just to record it, just use I or voice memo, or, one of the other AI note takers. I'm curious, when you think about like with parents right now, one of the words you have been using is sovereign. You said have your own sovereign income, which I think is so great, but when you think about sovereignty as with our children in this, um, do you find that it would be useful to a have these conversations with your kids, and then second is to record those conversations, or teach your kids to really embrace the verbal nature, that they don't necessarily have to understand a structure and here's how you put together a paper, and all the things that school would like us to believe, that that's actually being articulate. I don't know, is that making sense?
Yes, because here's where I go is you got, whether you're going to be a leader using AI or not using AI, you need to describe the vision and the goals and the outcome and maybe the constraints in language that other people can understand. And so, from that perspective, articulating your ideas, advocating for yourself, all these things are important things for us to do, to use our voices. And it just so happens that you could take that same transcript and start prompting with it and have some interesting explorations. But when it comes to sovereignty, I think the biggest opportunity and my hope for our son is that he can work with these technologies and use them to get out his ideas, to share value with the world, but also he knows where the limit is and where he starts and stops and where his thoughts are his thoughts and where he can go and what he can do if he doesn't want to do any of this. And so if I do nothing else but help him understand what his unique gifts are, what he loves, what he doesn't like, how he learns, the and be a mirror for him in that way. Okay, we can teach prompting because it's going to evolve a million times before he's out and about in the world. Maybe we're not even prompting, and by that point, it's brain computer interfaces. But even at that point, I want to be able to have a conversation about, okay, let's talk about devices in your body, on your body, or in your body. At what point are you thinking your thoughts? Where do our thoughts come from? What do you think? Like, there's so many endless ways to go here. And I want to feed and nourish his curiosity and see how these are tools that we can use to get what we want. And like a technology could be a ladder, it can be a hammer, or it can be an advanced AI system. But either way, we're using the tools are not using us.
Yeah. So if someone's listening to us and you have kids anywhere from, so for example, obviously my 10-month-old, probably not, we're not quite there yet, but my 5-year-old tomorrow, and to my 17-and-a-half-year-old, how would you recommend, and what structure would you have the conversation around AI? And how would you have as parents introduce it in a way, probably first to themselves if they're not super comfortable with it? So I think don't ask your children to be comfortable something that you haven't, I think, probably been comfortable. But what sort of structure and instructions would you give, being someone who's had a 14-year head start on AI before, AI used to be like a movie that Will Smith was in, right? And but like how would you articulate that?
Yeah, I mean, first I would map it onto the family values. Like we've got a couple of, I mean, because what you want to do, it's a family culture is just like a company culture, and you want to have a culture of learning and growth and continuous evolution. So we have a couple of values that we have in our house, and they're printed and posted. And one is pilots, not passengers. So to us, we're driving, we're creating, we are acting. And so that has a very specific meaning in terms of how we show up in our family. But another one is always growing, always evolving. And so if you've got these family values, and has nothing to do with technology, and it has everything to do with technology, because if you have something that is a value that is around continuous learning, now you can go, okay, we're going to get together and every week we're going to learn and do something together. And because I think part of the excitement is you don't have to be an expert to teach it. If you then say and come from a place of humility, like, wow, there's a lot changing. I'm going to do my best to get prepped, but we're learning together. How much more fun is that? And it's less scary because it's not like school where there's an authoritarian who knows the answer quizzing you. It's we're learning together. And I think this would be a really interesting very promptable set of things. Now, you want to tie it into what gets the kids interested, because if it's interesting to them, they'll want to do it. They'll want to learn more about it. So one of the ways that I got my son interested in voice prompting. Now he had a speech delay, so he was using an AAC device, which was basically an iPad with a speech to text, an image to speech he'd touch an icon and it would correspond with the color or the verb or the noun. And so he was familiar with the concept of, okay, I can use this to simulate what language. But then once he did get his speech, now we started really easy, and it was like bedtime stories. Like, give me a 2-minute bedtime story, age appropriate for a 4-year-old who loves cars, and specifically the Pixar movie Cars, and then I would like talk about different things that happened in the day, different values that I wanted it to share, teamwork, friendship, but also like some of the sticky things that happened in our day. And then he would talk and add in his own details, what the characters were named or who else he wanted to mix in another character that he liked. And so then he'd giggle, and then we'd have this like whole story. But like then the next day he's like, I want tonight's story to be about, and then he'd start going. And so I'm like, oh, okay, say it again. And then, so there's that. But there's also one of the coolest things, and this is interesting for older kids. I hadn't thought about it until now, but I took my last year of bank statements, all credit cards, and our business and personal bank. I anonymized it, and I put it into, at that time it was Notebook LM, but now Claude Code is easy. And I was like, okay, let's make a real budget, because the budget I have in my budgeting app is not the real budget. Let's make the two match. And by the way, here are the different things that I know we want to save for and spend on. And I just started talking to it, and I was like, make it accessible, because I don't I took oceanography to get out of math, like I'm not trying to like become a financial analyst. And I got not only did I get a really great budget, but I got a really cool, and this is another agent in my stack, but imagine teaching financial literacy to an older kid, with real numbers and real stakes, and allowing them to manage, I've got a Kalshi account, for predictions market bets. And, there's so many different research-based ways that you can either make more money or save money that are really easy to automate, using AI. And then just making it a practice. What did you learn today? What did you learn this week? What's something surprising? What's something you're curious about that we can do with AI? And just making it part of the conversation, and also, like video games, modeling when it's time to stop, modeling what it's like to lose, or in video games, but in terms of AI systems, like when you're not really getting a useful result, or when you're asking it something, like it's not an oracle, it's a prediction machine. So, you know,
Would you say what percentage of parents are approaching it like you? And by the way, just to be clear, I'm not saying that Marissa's like your way is the right way. I want anyone who's listening to this, I'm not saying that, but I just, in my mind, I think about if we as parents, our goal is to, like you said to your parents, right? They got it to this point the best they could, and it's their hope was that they leave it better than they found it, right? And then you do the same thing. And it seems to me that this is a potential two roads diverge in a wood that no one is talking about. It's the most silent road that we have had in generations that's existential. And so, what percentage do you think of parents are actually looking at AI as the same as I'm leaving them an inheritance?
I live in a filter bubble, and I'd still say under 10, 2, 5, I don't know, because the thing that I'm seeing more is, I don't want him to grow up with AI, or I don't want her to grow up with AI. And I really admire, respect, understand, and value the perspective that comes from, which is, hold on, let's just give the kid a chance to be a kid. And then um and we got to find a way to do both somehow. So this is us living and modeling something we don't have rules for. And how many times I've experienced that in parenting in the last 6 years, where I'm like, wow, I'm modeling how to parent a child without yelling or getting angry, because there's certain things where we're just breaking that cycle. But there's also this, we've got to, as parents, operate from a place where there's a non-zero probability that um, jobs have fully changed form, and it's going to happen in the next 5 to 15 years. And so if there is not certainty on how to properly educate a child for the future, and how to uh, give our kids a heads up on what jobs are likely to be lucrative, we've just got to figure out how to tap into what they're interested in and show them how to create value for others. And that's where I think entrepreneurs have such a leg up, because we create value like fish swimming. It's just what we do. And so the exposure to entrepreneurial thinking, whether it's by I interviewed 44 entrepreneurs, child development experts, and futurists when I was pregnant with our son, because I was so curious. And one of the women I interviewed had a family rule. And she was like, every kid, she had like 5 or 6 kids that she was homeschooling, is going to be to have their own cash flowing business before they're out of the house. And I thought, what an interesting family cultural rule. And I think that's the opportunity, is like, how do we teach them entrepreneurial skills, value creation, how to use these tools to make money? Kind of requires us to dabble too. But if you did that as a family, what an interesting initiative.
It is an interesting initiative, but it also, it used to be in terms of where you came from, your socioeconomic, your geographic, right? All of those factors played into and this is where, in terms of like identity based politics, is like the genesis of all this is from. But what I'm hearing you say is that like AI, if you just teach, what I was listening to you just say and talking about your son, and him teaching him how to actually let's create a story. These are the building blocks, because you and I beforehand had a little bit of conversation, and you'd said that the real question that we all face when we think about AI is that what happens when you're finally free enough to ask what you actually want, and which sounds really exciting. And I've seen this across entrepreneurs, right? We all go, if you could just have whatever it is you want. I think humans are really good at what they don't want. Want to be free from this, this, and this. But the really scary question isn't the freedom from, it's actually the freedom to, because we have spent we've spent next to zero time asking the question, what do you actually want? And so I think what I love about what you just articulated, and by the way, no one's talking about this. I've never heard anyone else talk about it. I mean, maybe in a high level, but for you to actually share in terms of how you're utilizing that, because I'm guessing at the same time that you're talking about bringing AI in, is that, well, because I also know you're also probably spending equal, if not more time, not on technology. Real quickly, I want to go back to the question about wanting what you want, but can you talk about that? Because I think it's really critical that when people are hearing this and they go, oh, I don't want my kid to grow up in AI, because I think they're wanting them to be part of the generation I think that you and I grew up in, which was, we were born in an era where there wasn't internet yet, right? And that then it finally came in, and that we still played outside. And but can you talk a little bit about that balance? And then I want to come back to that question about wanting, if you could actually have, what is it that you really want?
Yeah, man. So my end goal is, I want my kid to be ready for anything, you know, and adaptable enough so that no matter where things are going, because I can't control anything about the future. And what I can control in my own life is my ability to reinvent myself. And time and again in my life and my career, I have reinvented myself, had a major life pivot. And in that pivot, I got to shed a whole lot of what I didn't want. And then in that room that was created, figure out, okay, well, and sometimes you get to what you want by shedding what you no longer want, and it's kind of like making a soup and you're simmering the soup and the water starts to evaporate. And then what's left is the distilled, yummy soup, but you had to get rid of a lot of water that wasn't really adding a lot anyway. That's what I think about this process because I did not get a lot of practice at saying what I want. And and saying out loud to others. I got a lot of practice on, ooh, okay, how can I squeeze what I want into an opportunity, or that has existing boundaries and constraints. And then when I grew and I outgrew that container, and like I'm looking at the pots behind that I just repotted because they break, it's not the plant's fault that it grew and broke the container. The container just wasn't big enough to support what the plant was becoming. And the difference is like we're not plants. We can get up and walk away. We can change jobs. We can move across the world, and start over. And I think that is something really, really powerful. Is we can always start over. And to start over, though, you got to know who you are and what you're wanting to go to, or at least what you're wanting to get away from. So I want to give our son those tools so that no matter what he chooses to do, he can figure out the business models are going to change, the technology is going to change, but what won't change is his unique skills and gifts and how he can use them to help other people. I was trying to explain to him what an entrepreneur is and what I do all day. He knows that I'm on, calls a lot, and I go, entrepreneurs help people. And I was like, what are some of the ways that you see people helping other people? And we talked about, all the different people we interact with and who are entrepreneurial in their own way, or they're solo creators and they've got their businesses. And I just think that having conversations about all the unique ways that you can get your needs met, your financial needs met, that's an interesting conversation because now when we get into I talk about like, are we creating palaces or prisons, and the worst thing that you could do is have technology like this and create a business structure that you don't want, so that like it's like the palace you don't want to live in, and that's the thing. If it's holding you back in some way from the fullest expression, um, of you, well, do you want to change it? Do you want more? Some people don't want more. Some people, want to settle, and then everybody's got a different growth trajectory and appetite for change. But man, oh man, if you can dance with it a little bit and even have some fun while you're dancing, there's a limitless future ahead.
I think that often people, and I don't actually know where this came from, but I almost feel like I grew up a little bit in this, Marissa, that there's a net sum game, that there's a finite amount of money, there's a finite amount of time, there's a finite amount of opportunities. And when I hear you say that, and I think that AI has even more democratized this, is that money is not a net sum game. As I'm listening to you tell that story about your lead salesperson, clearly lead salesperson, like wasn't hurting, I'm guessing for money, was probably making a really good living being lead, but still was able to go out and just by made an additional like $6,000. Well, did someone have to lose for that $6,000? No, what actually had is that he had to gain more awareness around himself, and the more awareness, at least this is my experience in my own personal journey, watching you and your journey, watching other entrepreneurs, the more awareness gained usually correlates to the rewards. And by the way, not just monetary rewards. One of the things you and I have talked a lot about is like peace and presence. Those are also rewards, right? I'm listening to you talk about 3.5-day weeks. I'm guessing it's not for you just to go watch Price is Right on Friday morning, right? I'm guessing like it's beyond the money.
Yeah, it's walking with my son to and from school every day and doing all the midday, school recitals. It's being there for, my mom worked a, traditional 9 to 5, but then LA, you've got the commute. So, I mean, it was a long day. And, she could never come to my games. I played 4 sports. She could never come to the recitals. So it was very important to me to be there for him, to look into the crowd and see me, to go and be able to give him a squeeze, to be there at the school pep rallies for the fundraisers and stuff. So that's my story. But it's also while he's at school, my husband and I can go on a hike on Mondays because I know what Mondays used to feel like, and they did not feel expansive. They felt crazy making. And so, I never wanted to have Sunday scaries again. So, how do I set things up so that Monday is a day that is of choice? And if I work Monday, there's not a Friday, and if there is a Tuesday, there's not a Thursday. So it's able to flex, so I can be responsive to what the businesses need, but also so that I'm there for what the families need. And we have a day and we go to the beach, or we make it a long weekend, and it's not a thing because the systems have been set up to either protect the boundaries or protect me from scheduling over the boundaries, because that's an equal danger. Is like, oh, I've got Monday open, sure, I can just do that. And and then sometimes it's like we free up the time, but then we reinvest it right into more work, and then we go, why am I still feeling so exhausted? This technology was supposed to free us up, which, by the way, I'm seeing with AI now, is a lot of the power users are going, I'm not working any less. I'm going, well, there still is a moment for us to go, what do I want? And what am I willing to do to get it? I have to say no a lot. It feels awkward to say no. The Q4 2025 was my season of no, and I just declined everything because I wanted to get like that. I wanted to get the yayas out, of just like, okay, speaking opportunity, no thank you, not this quarter. Let's look again in the new year. New collaborations, nope, 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 and built that muscle. But it was also because I came from a place where to your point earlier on, I was addicted to being overextended. I was addicted to being busy. I thought that that's where I created value and I felt important. It feels good to be busy and effective and productive, to feel like you've gotten the most out of your day. And so to take that skill and capability away temporarily and go, okay, now your contribution is between 10 and 3, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and either Monday or Friday. What does that look like? And then what it caused is I had to increase my standard for what I paid attention to and what I needed to delegate. And delegation is the first step to automation, because if you do it with a person, now you can do it with an agent setup. And then I started going, well, what do I want my time to be about? And it turns out I was not really excited um, at talking to my husband about the logistics of our family and what needed to be purchased. So I exported the last 3 years of Amazon purchases and I put it in there and I said, okay, what needs to be on subscribe and save and at what frequency? Here are my last 2 years of Instacart orders by season. What are we ordering and when? And what of those things can I put on a pre-scheduled? I still finalize it and do it, but just build the cart for me with the things that I know I'm going to need. Now I'm not asking my husband about like what we need to buy or what he needs to go and get. It's already done. And then our meals are planned. But then it's funny because with my husband, like we ran out of, we're like, what do we talk about now? Like we were so used to like, and two parents who were just like doing all the logistics and the kid logistics. It's like, well, what now? And so like that's where the hikes came back. Is like, okay, now we have time to reconnect. But it was weird. It was awkward. So we've got to be willing to go through the awkward part to get to the bigger, better future. And it's just going to be weird. But like, because it's weird and unfamiliar doesn't always mean it's bad.
No. Uh, Two things like come to my mind is that a question and I think more an observation. I'm curious how, because you said like, hey, the heavy AI users are like, hey, I'm still burning the wicks on both end, and so I'm curious how you have balanced ambition with time and space. And the reason why I say time and space, like one of the more recent books that I've just really fallen in love with is The Comfort Crisis. And in essence, the major takeaway I took from there is that the major precursor to creativity is boredom. And we don't actually, that's not a scheduled activity in our calendar. I think we had everyone pull up their calendar and be like, show me where you have boredom scheduled in. And I'm curious how you have balanced that, like productivity, relationships, connection, but also creating space for boredom. And how do you balance out these two incredible energy sources? And most people are listening and being like, boredom, energy source. I'm like, no, like boredom is, it's like the equal twin to ambition.
That's funny because, my first 10, 15 years of my career was around people who optimize their toothbrushing time. And so like the early days of AI, like, your transcription assistants and Otter and stuff, I would get really great ideas doing the dishes or in a shower. So I would put Otter on and then I could just talk during the shower, because I couldn't risk like not having that moment optimized so that I had the thing. So like I've been there, and you know, you can always make more money, but you can't get your time back. And I think anyone who has experienced losses of any kind, we've bonded over our losses, and my parents, and it's like everybody, not everybody, but I think a lot of folks assume that they got more time, and oh, I'll do this when. And I think that uh there is this moment where we've got to accept that nothing is guaranteed. And because of that, every moment is a new choice to make a different decision. And are you now making a decision that's leading you towards your goals? And then it's like whatever you're not changing, you're choosing. And so make sure that you're choosing the things that you want. So that's one thing. And the other thing about ambition is there's seasons. I think there's seasons of it. There's winter time. I want to hibernate. I don't want to do anything new, but the ideas will still come. But that's for them to incubate so that when spring comes and I do feel that fire and that energy, I've got 6 or 7 different Claude Code sessions now that are building out ideas. And then one of my top use cases for my personal OpenClaw, one of the systems that you can use to build your own agent system, is if I enter in any brilliant ideas that happen between Friday afternoon and Sunday end of day, the only thing the system can do is log them. It cannot build them with me because I've got to sit down on Monday and then properly build it out and do it. But I build all these things in so that I can still have the idea when it comes, and build when it makes sense in really compressed portions. And then there's the there's the things that come up. Our brains are wired to keep us alive and to keep us safe. And so there's a constant fear that I've balanced of running out, fear of running out. The opportunity will run out, the velocity of the deal will die. And if I don't do this right now, someone else will do it. And that's real. And I happen to have a lifetime of lived experiences that the right opportunities for me don't have those same restrictions, constrictions. It might come back in a different way, in a different form, through a different person. But they don't. Anything that's meant for me is going to come to me easily, and that's a hard one to learn.
I can only imagine, because I think what you just articulated every single person, whether you're entrepreneur or not, feels. It's this, it's FOMO, but to like another level. And I know that I have felt that. And I think that the more I have gotten comfortable that there are certain unique or things like I like to call max contributions that I can bring, there is there's almost like a relief. And it's interesting, the more things I've actually turned down, the bigger the actually opportunities that have been finding me have become exponential. Like turn down like a high six figure, like high six figure opportunity. It didn't make sense, but it could have been so easy. I could have justified it in so many ways about why I did it, but it would have had to sacrifice more time. And I didn't do it. And that has come back full circle, exponentially more so.
It's wild to hear stories like that because those are the ones I'm starting to hear more often. It's the things that you say no to that are, or the things that you remove, the obligations that you remove are even more important than the things you add on. I had a similar situation. This is like a couple years ago now, but I was like, well, I'll say yes to this little tiny advisory gig. It'll be on the side. Like I can just couple hours a week. It's never a couple hours a week. And I started having the Sunday scaries because the meetings were on Monday. And I was like, what is this feeling? Hold on. I know this feeling. Why am I feeling this way on Sunday at brunch? I'm thinking about the Monday meeting. No, no, no. This is not what Sunday is about anymore. And I fired the client, even though it was a nice monthly thing. And then the freedom, the money came back to me in a different way because I was freed up. And that's the kind of conversation where when I talk to our CTOs, and it's like over 350 through the program now as we're recording this. And there's always this conversation in their first 2 weeks about their four freedoms. What do they want? What are they willing to do to get it? And inside of that, there's all these little limiting beliefs that come up about what's possible. And we help them work out what it could look like and what the dream is. I talk about one of our CTOs, Paul. um, he was feeling burned out, and so we had a conversation about it, and I was like, what's your relationship like with fun? And he goes, non-existent. So I was like, well, what would you love to do? Like what is fun? And he was like, I'd love to go to the driving range and hit balls. And I was like, okay, go there on Tuesdays at lunch. And he's like, what? I can do that? I thought, and it's like, oh, limiting belief. But it's like, no, you're your boss. You are the boss of you. So he tried that on, did it, and then all of a sudden, 3 or 4 deals that had been stalling all came through within 5 weeks or so. He started going on, he ended up losing 25 pounds from this journey. His relationship with his wife got stronger than ever. And all because of golf on Tuesday. It's not golf on Tuesday, but it was because he allowed himself to break free from the constraints that and the old rules of what work meant. So I like collect these stories because we're about to redefine what work means. And I think we might even need a new word for it because the word work, has all these associations of toil and exhaustion. But there's something that's possible now, and all of my energy is going towards this. We talk about extractive capitalism that is taking resources and making them more valuable. But I think there's an opportunity to create a regenerative economy, one where we still are using the principles of capitalism and creating value for other people, but in a way that's regenerative versus extractive. And I think that starts from within. It's an inside job. And I just feel like this is the future.
Yeah, I love that you said, and I want to hear a little bit more about exactly how you define regenerative economy, because number one, I've never heard anyone say that. Two is that you're totally right. when we think about work, you know, when I'm coaching entrepreneurs, I tell them that this is an energy game. Start, stop. Like time is just a representation of how we allocate energy. What we do for our activities is a representation of how we allocate, and then not only that, but then how we get paid for those activities. It's a basically energy exchange, right? I'm going to give you some energy. And so it almost seems like in this, when you talk about these words of economy, right? There's capital allocators, if you want to use capitalism, right? It almost seems that people think about, especially in the non VC private equity, like PE world, that has all this capital or wealthy people, right? Because it's us versus them, right? I'm losing at the hand of the wealthy people. But what I like about, and I'm imagining what I'm understanding the regenerative economy, it's no longer about capital allocation. Now, is capital important? 100%. But what's more important is energy and ideas. An idea is this packaged energy, and that we all have the ability to be energy allocators, right? I mean, in essence, so I'm just curious, can you talk through any thoughts on what I just said? And then second, how do you define a regenerative economy, and how can we start playing in that space?
Yeah, man. So I think about so the concept of regenerative comes to me through regenerative agriculture. So we're taking a resource out and it's this particular crop, but we're doing these specific things to regenerate the soil biodiversity and the health. It's rotating the crops. There's a number of tactical, practical things that they do, but so that as you're taking the resource, the crop, you are replenishing where it comes from. You see people have business models where you buy the thing and they plant a tree, or you buy the fish and they plant the coral. Like there's some measure that's done to uh, improve the system or the habitat in which the product or service is operating in. And when I think about it in terms of people, I see it in like, I got a big family in Hawaii and it's everybody, it's very collaborative, and one of my favorite things is when my cousin got married to his wife. She's native Hawaiian and we're Filipino. And so each of the families was cooking for the other family and everybody was working on something. And somebody went and they brought the pig and somebody else went and, I was on like garlic duty, just smashing garlic, but everybody was doing something to help. And then the wedding happens and there's 500 people there, and it's time to eat. And the first thing is the Hawaiian family went to our side. We went to their side. We need to see what you're eating. But there's this principle of like, what can you do to help? How can we work together? And I think bartering systems, because, money is just one way that we can barter, but I've seen it happen so many times where I've helped out a hairdresser, and like I get a cut and color, she gets a website and a business strategy, and we both feel like we got the best end of it. But because we're in a space of giving, there's that regenerative aspect. But there is also I see it in teamwork as a fractal. So when we are working in a way that we're true to our gifts, we're fully expressed, and there's a different way that we show up. There's a different presence and power that we bring to the conversation, whatever it's about. And if a company is operating like that, making decisions from that place, different decisions get made. There's more ownership, more creativity, naturally more innovation because people are filled up and they're not extracted and exhausted and burned out showing up at work trying to produce their best thinking. It's like pouring from an empty cup. You can't do it. So if everybody shows up with their cups filled, and then we're creating businesses from that place and space, the decisions are going to be better. This is our hypothesis for CTOX is we want to coach technology leaders who are making decisions about technology for many businesses. And if they're doing it from a well-regulated nervous system, a regular relationship with fun, play, and the things that for them make life worth living, whether it's travel or whatever, they're going to make better decisions. And the companies that are operating that way now, I don't have data on this, but like I'd be willing to bet that they're going to do well, do better, and perform better than the ones where everyone is burned out and just trying to have them be better robots. And the turnover is high, morale is low, and people are working crazy work weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a good bet. I think that I've never seen anyone work really, really well for long. Doesn't mean short sprints from a place of scarcity, from a place of like exhaustion, and in a place of, I think that fear only works so long. And I think that, I mean, there's no research paper, but what'd you say? You've had 340 CTOs go through your program. Are they making more or less after your program?
At least as much. Some have their $1 million practices and they've got more than when they started.
And do they have more or less time to do the things, to answer your question of when you actually have the ability to finally ask what you actually want? Do they have more or less than what when they started with you?
For sure, more. Some of them are taking their first vacations in 17 years. I loved it when last summer we had 3 different CTOs on 3-week family vacations that they had never taken since the kids were born. Like, that's a cool moment. And some of those CTOs also took a good amount of time off in December for the holidays. So it's neat to have the people say, "I never take a vacation. I've never taken a vacation," and then they come in the meetings and they go, "Oh, I want to travel more with my family," and then they actually go and do it. And there are so many like individual stories of that we see in the community where their goal was more travel and they crushed that goal, and now this year 2, there's even more travel, and it's almost never about working more. And that's an interesting takeaway too, is like when you give people the option to choose because their financial needs are met, many of them will not choose to work more. They'll choose to do other things. And how interesting that we now have some business models that allow people to do that.
Yeah, well, and I think that I'm guessing they feel called to more purpose and value. And I think when you're doing purpose and value work, now can you work a ton and do people take it too far? Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like, if like I eat too many carrots, my stomach hurts. Carrots, pretty healthy for you. Too many carrots, my stomach hurts. And but I think that when you're doing value work, purpose work, that the effectiveness is just exponentially more. The energy allocation and the energy return is just more. Marissa, this has been absolutely an amazing, amazing conversation. And quite honestly, like the list of questions, we could probably talk for like another hour and a half, but I'm going to be cognizant of time. I know that you have a bunch of really cool projects going on, and as you and I were having this conversation, you had said like, I'm more excited about it now than if we had had this conversation. I know you and I have been trying to work out through trying to get this arranged, but you're like, I'm more excited now. So can you talk a little bit about? I know you talk about like, hey, there might be a book forthcoming. You got if people have listened to this and they're saying, hey, I want to know more. Which, by the way, if you haven't listened to this and aren't going, you want to hear more, Marissa, I just got to tell you, there's a reason to maybe get like the inner working checked out, because like Marissa, just listening to you is melodic and just thought provoking. And so, but anyways, talk a little bit about some of the projects and if people want to know more about you or want to be able to engage you more.
Thank you. Thank you. So, if you're a technology leader and you want to explore a fractional CTO business model, CTOX.com is the place to do that. I support with a lot of the mindset work, the work life alignment. Through ridiculouslyefficient.com, I have a newsletter It's free, called the Simplicity Protocol. And the idea is it's not about what you add in, it's what you take out. And so every week, every issue is something that you can do right away that helps you audit the things you're focused on and remove things. And what's fun is I launched this in February, and so we're now going into the second quarter, and it's like, what do you do when you free up that hour or 3 or 4 by removing the obligations? And a lot of us are walking around with 2 to 10 hours of obligations in our calendar. And what would be possible if you identified it, named it, and then either removed it entirely or used AI to automate it? So there's that. And then thanks for mentioning the book. So I've been coaching senior leaders and entrepreneurs my whole life, 20 years, well, not my whole life, but 20 years professionally. And I've coached 500 one-on-one since November 2022, specifically on navigating the threshold of change between where you are stepping over, you're walking away from who you were, and you're stepping into who you are becoming. And there's some really interesting laws and principles I've discovered in doing that. And so I'm in the process of building that out. I think that now we all have the opportunity to reinvent ourselves, and there isn't a manual. And so I aspire to create that. And by sharing it here, that means I got to finish it. So there's that. And then I also am working on a kid's book. And this one is for an older child, maybe young adult, and just about what goes on in a world where increasingly powerful algorithms are tracking our every move and optimizing. And there's a counter narrative. And so it's a story about the relationship between a mother and a child and what they do. And there's lots of goodies in there. And I'm really excited about this one too.
That's amazing. I for one am really excited to explore all things that you have put out. So again, check out CTOX if you're in the tech leadership world, and you're ridiculouslyefficient.com, which, by the way, I mean, you gave so many nuggets today, so many nuggets that were just really simple. Marissa, thank you so much for being here. And it has been an absolute pleasure. It was better than even what I was hoping for in planning this. And we may have to have a part 2. But as I like to do, I like to leave and let my guests do the last ripple question thought for our audience.
I think what's coming up is I'd love for everyone to reflect on what you'd love the next 10 years to feel like. And what would be true? What would you let go of if you could start entirely over and, start with that clean sheet of paper and really play with that vision until it feels good. Like there's going to be something in your body that's like, oh, cool. And when you have that vision, consider whether to prompt with it and share it with your AI of choice. And, what could I do to get there? Make me a plan, make me an 18-month plan, make me a 3-month plan, and just see what happens. Because I've observed time and again that when I have what feels like a big, audacious, impossible dream, and I share it with my buddy Claude, it's closer and more achievable than I thought. And I even get fired up enough to do it. And I think that experience is worth having for yourself so you can figure out how you want to manage this with your kids, with your work. Just have it for yourself first.
What a rich conversation. Thanks for being here. It's been an absolute joy, Marissa.
Thank you so much, Ben. What a gift it is to be interviewed by you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. A big thanks to Elation Lab for the production and creative design. Remember to like, subscribe, and follow us on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Keep listening for more Max Life.